Hello, my name is Diane, and today I want to talk about all of the books I read in 2025. Saying it like that makes it sound like there's a lot of them. I only finished 15 books last year, which I don't think that's bad. I'm not really disappointed in it, but it's definitely not the number of books I was hoping to have read last year. I ended up just focusing my energy on other things than reading, but this year I'm hoping to read a lot more than 15 books. We'll see if I can do that. So I just want to go through all of the books that I read, mostly in the order that I read them. I'm not going to rank them or anything. I also don't normally rate books, but I do want to talk about what I enjoyed and what I ended up not enjoying. I did also DNF a lot of books last year to the point where I stopped keeping track of what books I was DNFing. Some of them I might return to in the future. Some of them just weren't working for me, and I don't know what I'm going to end up going back to, so I just sort of gave up tracking which of those and stuck to tracking the ones that I actually finished. So, like I said, I have 15 books to talk about, and I'm just going to get started with what I finished in January of last year. The first book I finished in 2025 was Level Unknown by David Dalglish. This is the first in one of his newer series that is a lit RPG series. If you don't know what that is, it's fantasy or sci-fi series where you get to see the characters gaining experience points and leveling and learning new abilities in a more numerical, you can track it kind of way. It's sort of like reading a video game, which I think might be a really weird experience for some readers, probably not for everyone. This is the only lit RPG series I've ever read, but it has a mix of fantasy and sci-fi within it. There are two worlds that our main character goes between, and in his real world is sci-fi. He lives on a space station, a research station, and then he goes into this other world through a magical artifact that he finds, and that is very much fantasy, where there is magic and gods and things like that, and we see him trying to figure out what's going on and trying to figure out how the world that he's now entered is connected to what's going on in his real world. I did also, getting a little out of order with what I read the second book in this series, which is Level Ascension, which just continues this story. The third book just came out in December called Level Apocalypse, and I just got a copy of that, so I'm really excited to continue with this series. I am having a lot of fun with it. The next book I finished is The Cautious Traveler's Guide to the Wastelands by Sarah Brooks. I mostly liked this book, but I didn't really like the ending. It just felt a little lackluster for the journey we go on. This takes place on a train, which I think is a very interesting setting, and the people on the train have been told that the world outside the area that they're passing through is very dangerous. No one's supposed to get off the train at any point, and the last trip that the train took, something bad happened, but no one, including the crew, remembers what happened. So this follows the first trip after that something bad happened in their first journey through the wastelands, and there's a lot of really interesting magical features. You don't really know who on the train is there for what reasons, like who they really are and what their real motivations for taking this train journey are. And I did really enjoy the bulk of this book, but I just felt like the reveal at the end wasn't that interesting or revealing. So definitely a cool setting and a generally interesting story, but overall, I didn't find the ending to be as satisfying as I had hoped, given the journey I had gone on up until that point. Then I read Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales by Heather Fawcett. This is the conclusion to the Emily Wilde trilogy. I've really enjoyed this series. I wasn't expecting a whole lot from it when I read the first book, and I ended up loving it. I thought the second book was even better than the first. And then this one, I think, was a good conclusion to the series, but I would also say it was my least favorite in the series. We do get a lot of appearances from all of the characters that we met throughout the other two books and kind of seeing where they ended up, which I guess is good, but also I didn't really care what they were up to that much, to be perfectly honest. Some of the characters were just like they were great characters in the moments that they were there, but some of the time in this story it felt like they were just sort of there to be there, that everyone got to make an appearance before the series concluded. And I'm just not really a fan of that in general. I'm okay with characters coming and serving their purpose because we are really just following one character, and then maybe there's a mention of them, but they don't really need to be there all the time. I don't know, there were just other things going on, and we were finally, at least I thought we were going to be primarily in the fairylands and seeing like the royal fae court and stuff like that, and I was really interested in that. And then it just got a little too easy for Emily to go and visit other people elsewhere in the human realm, and I enjoyed the story. I think this sounds like I didn't enjoy it. I did enjoy the story. I just was hoping to get more new stuff and less revisiting of old stuff. I did really like the series. I am glad that I read it, but I wish we had spent a more focus in this final book on some new things, and particularly on Emily and Wendell's relationship, where they're at this point in the story, than we ended up getting. Then I read The Sword Unbound by Gareth Hanrahan, the sequel to The Sword Defiant. I also last year read The Sword Triumphant, which is the conclusion to this trilogy, The Lance of the Firstborn. I loved this series. I think this is a great series if you love more like quest-based fantasy and a large cast of characters. We do mostly only follow a couple characters, but there is a large cast of characters throughout this. I think they're all very likable. And unfortunately, no one's really safe. There's no guarantee that any one character is going to make it to the end of the story. It also does cover a number of years, but ultimately the series follows a hero who is maybe past his prime at the beginning of the series, and then we see many years of his life following that, of the consequences of the things he and his friends did when they were young, when they thought they were saving the world, and then they get to see what happened because of their actions, and also learn more about the world than they knew when they were young, and try and save it again with that knowledge, with being in different places in their lives. And I just really enjoyed it. I loved the world. I loved the characters. I really loved the main character, Alf. He has an evil sentient sword that he is entrusted with, and that is a whole character of its own, and I love seeing their relationship develop throughout. And this is easily one of the best series I've read in recent years, and I unfortunately never hear anyone talking about it, but if you like that kind of fantasy, I definitely recommend checking this out. I think it's a great read. Then I read At the Bottom of the Garden by Camilla Bruce. This is about a woman who becomes the caretaker of her two nieces, and we find out that they have some sort of magical abilities, and at least one of them can see the ghost of a man in the aunt's garden. And then you find out things that the aunt has done that she's trying to keep hidden, and she's really only taken in these girls in hopes of claiming their inheritance for herself. I think the premise of this had a lot of promise, but it wasn't nearly as dark as I had imagined it would be, or hoped it would be. I feel like the tension and the danger that these girls were meant to have been in never really felt as dangerous as I expected it to, given some of the things the aunt has done. And we also learn, in my opinion, far too much about the aunt and her backstory. I don't know if it was meant to humanize her or just to give a reason why she is the way she is for whatever reason, but the more we learned about her, the more she just seemed kind of an absurd villain. She's just obsessed with diamonds. And the more that we learn about her and see her perspective, the more I just felt like she was a very silly villain, very absurd, and I was more interested in the girls, but also, again, the potential for tension and them to be endangered never really came to be as much as I was expecting that from this story. I don't know, it just wasn't as dark or tense as I had expected from the premise of it. It was a little too light and a little too silly in the villain, in my opinion. And I'm not sure that was the intention. So this one was fine. Wasn't for me. Then I read The Serpent and the Wolf by Rebecca Robinson. I wasn't expecting to like this. This is a fantasy romance. I'm not a romance reader. I generally don't like stories that focus just on the romantic relationship, and I ended up really enjoying this book. Our two main characters are in an arranged marriage, and our female main character also believes that she's been cursed with magic. So they come to a very strained agreement that he will help her figure out sort of how to beat the magic and survive, because she thinks it's going to ultimately kill her. And in turn, she will help him maintain his throne and do political stuff. But I've seen complaints that there wasn't enough world building in this. I really liked the world. I thought it was really interesting seeing the differences between the two nations of the male main character and the female main character. I can't remember either one of their names, I'm sorry. But seeing the differences in not only the way that they treat and regard magic, but also just generally in their culture. I liked watching their relationship build over time as they spent more time together and they got to actually know one another and clear up some misconceptions from the beginning of their relationship to the end of this book. It was a very pleasant surprise for me. Next, I read The Full Moon Coffee Shop by Mai Mochizuki. This is about a magical coffee shop that appears when people need it, and it's run by talking cats. And it's sounds so silly, and that's why I read it. There is I don't know if it's a direct sequel or if it's just another book about the coffee shop. Like, I don't know if you have to read this book to read the other book that came out, but there is another book about this coffee shop. And we follow 3 characters who go to this coffee shop, and their stories become connected as we go through the full book, but you follow them one at a time. I liked the idea of this, but I don't think it really hit for me. I didn't really connect with any of the 3 characters that went to this coffee shop, and a lot of the way that the advice they received was given to them just didn't really land for me. I certainly don't think this is a bad book. I think it was well written and an interesting idea, but where I didn't connect with any of the characters, I ended up not really connecting with the overall story. So I would say this was probably a good book. It just wasn't for me. I'm not really the audience for this type of story. Then I read The Memory of the Ogiesi by Moses Osiotomi. This is the 3rd and final book in the Forever Desert trilogy, which is a novella trilogy. I'm not a big short story or novella reader. I honestly think they're really difficult to write, to have a story and a world, especially with fantasy, that feels full and complete. And where I do like those bigger worlds and larger casts of characters, generally, I feel like following such a small, like a slice of a world, doesn't always give enough time or space to develop everything and make it feel really satisfying for me. But I loved all 3 of these novellas in this series. This takes place in a desert called the Forever Desert, not surprisingly. And in each book, we follow different characters at different points in time, and we get to see not only the one character's journey within each book of them learning about the world around them, but also making their place in the history of this world. And then in the next book, we get to see how those actions have been passed down through time in history, how the world has changed over time, how those characters may or may not have been remembered over the years, and just seeing the full cycle of what's going on in this desert, of this isolated city, and also the lands around them. I really enjoyed it. I think they were really well written. I liked all of the characters, some more than others, but I liked seeing each of their journeys in this setting. And this is another one I don't hear that many people talking about, but I wish more people would talk about it because I really enjoyed it, and I think it deserves the recognition because it's really well written. Then I read Echo of Worlds by M.R. Carey. This is the sequel to Infinity Gate and also the conclusion to that duology. This is about an AI that develops and the story of how it develops and the war between humans and machines. I really liked the first book, and while I enjoyed the second book, I liked the first book a lot more. We do have more characters and we follow them all simultaneously because in the second book they are all together already. In the first book we follow 3 characters individually and ultimately see how they come to be together. And I don't know what specifically about the second book didn't land as well for me as the first book did, but I think it was just following each of the characters going through a specific series of events to lead them to one another. And then in this one, they were all together problem solving and then enacting what they hoped would be a solution to what was going on in their worlds. But all together, I think they do tell a single story where you're seeing the development of everything and everyone coming together, and then you're seeing the actual problem and the real climax of the full duology. So didn't like it as much as the first book, but ultimately I did really like both of these. Then I read Revival by Tim Seeley and Mike Norton. This is a graphic novel series. I only read the first volume. I was planning to reread. I've read the whole series already, and I was planning to reread all of them, but I ended up only reading the first one and then setting them down for other things. But the TV adaptation of this came out last year, and I watched it and really enjoyed it. And I was curious because it had been so long since I had read the graphic novels, if it was as true to the graphic novels as I thought it was, or it was just because I had forgotten a lot of details from the books versus the show. So I wanted to reread it to compare it, but at this point I feel like if I reread it, I've forgotten a lot of the details and specifics from the show that I might just have to watch it again to be able to actually do that. So maybe it's a bit pointless, but I do enjoy the story and the series, so I'm just going to keep rereading it anyway this year. But I enjoyed both of them, the book and the show. I would recommend either one. Then I read Hemlock and Silver by T. Kingfisher. This is her most recent fantasy, I think. I'm pretty sure. And this is loosely a Snow White retelling where our main character comes up with antidotes for poisons, and the king hires her because he thinks his daughter is being poisoned. I liked this, said with no certainty. I mostly enjoyed this, but I didn't find it quite as engaging as her other fantasy did. I don't know if it was that the story wasn't as engaging for me, or if it's just at this point where I wasn't reading a great deal, that I was still pretty deep in a reading slump, and that's why I wasn't engaging with it. But I think I liked this. I just didn't, I don't remember a lot of details about this already, and it's only been a month since I read this one. So I don't know if that's the book or me because of how little I was reading at that point in the year. But I mostly enjoyed it, and I generally do like her retellings, and that they are very unique retellings, where she certainly changes a lot of things in whatever fairy tale she picks. Then to end the year, I read volumes 1 and 2 of Resident Alien. This is a graphic novel series that I haven't read previously, but I have watched the TV adaptation and I did enjoy it. So I think that concluded last year, but I've been wanting to read the comics to see how they compare, how much was actually changed in the show. And from just reading the first 2 volumes, I feel like a good amount was changed. Like the main character and the main storyline is pretty much the same, but a lot of the side characters and just things going on, how things happen, even from the beginning of the story, a lot's been changed, which I think is really interesting. So I'm also looking forward to reading this and comparing it to the show. It's tougher for me to compare them separately where it's been months, because while I remember a good amount of things, there's a lot of little details that might have changed that I'm not going to notice because they're just small things and I'm not closely examining them. But it's something that I have fun doing, seeing what's changed between a book and a screen adaptation. Whether or not I miss the tiny details, I'm not really analyzing these. This is just for fun for me because I think it's interesting. those are all 15 books that I finished in 2025. I think it's kind of obvious which ones were my favorites, but I particularly liked The Sword Unbound and The Sword Triumphant, finishing that series finally. I had so much fun reading it. I didn't want it to end, but I also really wanted to know how it was going to end. The Memory of the Ogiesi, concluding that series, would definitely be another favorite. And I think my third favorite, I guess that was technically 3, but 2 of them are the same series. I think my other favorite would be starting the Level Unknown series, Level Unknown and Level Ascension together, because I am really excited to read the third book in that and see that, and that has been a fun experience to read a lit RPG for the first time, and seeing a book written in that way is very different when they use skills and abilities and gain points. Seeing like a gamified book has been really interesting. So those are all the books I read this year, along with which ones were my favorite. Let me know if you had any standouts in 2025, what your favorite read or top 3 reads if you can't pick just one. Hopefully this will be an even better reading year for me and for you if you had a tough reading year as well. Otherwise, that's all for me today. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you next time. Bye.